Hello there, everyone. I am Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Today, I am continuing on with the Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts series, and I have a very special guest here to help me with that, the legendary Mike, the Fantasy Hitman Wright. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you got it, man. That intro, that's intentionally like riffing off of a Disney song, right?
Yeah, it got me some Breaking Bad there, so you can always tell the people who watch the show. Some of them hear the intro and immediately I can see the head bobbing in the green screen there in the background. But some people, it's just like, I have no idea what that is. So
No, I totally get it. I've done it too. I've used that one.
Yeah, I love it. Everyone says, "Oh, aren't you worried about getting sued?" Well, if I get big enough to the point where I have to worry about being sued by Breaking Bad, I'll deal with that problem when we get there. But for now, it's not a problem. So, once again, thank you for joining me. You want to take a second here to tell the people where they can find you? As you know, if you're watching this podcast and you don't know who he is, you're probably doing things backwards. So, but anyways, go for it, Mike.
Appreciate that. No, what's up, everybody? I'm Mike from the Fantasy Footballers podcast. We are a, redraft focused podcast, but we go year round, meaning that we'll be 5 shows. We're already 5 shows because through the end of the season, then we just keep going, 2 shows a week during the off season. But it's all about trying to give some good advice, help people make their own decisions, but also remembering that fantasy football is supposed to be fun. So let's have some fun while we're talking about it.
Yeah, you guys are definitely the most fun. I recommended you last year to a friend looking for a few new podcasts. And the first message I got was, "Great show. Why the hell was there a guy wearing a fish head?" That's the first thing he said. I was like, "Oh, that was the Wheel of Shame day, man. It's a long story. So that went over well.
Oh, yeah. Fish head was a good time.
It was. Some of those are hilarious, and they look like they're terrible to wear. So
they, in fact, are.
Yeah, I imagine that's the worst part about losing. So,
yep.
All right. Know you got a tight schedule, especially with 5 days a week. So I guess let's get into it. We didn't do our usual picks for Sleeper, Breakout, and Bust. I've kind of gone a little Wheel of Fortune here myself with the picks. So the first guy we're going to discuss is Buffalo running back James Cook. Fantasy Pros has him projected as RB30. Projections of 756.6 rushing yards, 4.5 touchdowns, 34.7 receptions for 261.2 yards, and 1.7 receiving touchdowns. What do you think about James Cook? Do you think he would qualify as a sleeper, breakout, or bust for you, or is he just there?
He, unfortunately for me right now, he's just kind of there. I don't hate he's going in drafts. This isn't the type of situation where they have to pay off. But it's just like we've been chasing Buffalo running backs now for years and years. And it's just, to me, James Cook, if you were around fantasy football for draft season and draft Twitter and all the hullabaloo about Devon A-Chain and how small he is because he's a sub 200-pound running back, guess who also was a sub 200-pound running back? And somehow that discourse didn't happen that year. At least I didn't notice the way that I noticed the A-Chain back and forth on Twitter. But he's smaller. I think he's a pretty electric player. But Buffalo running backs just haven't really come through for us in the past because Josh Allen's a mobile quarterback. Mobile quarterbacks simply do not throw the ball to the running back position like a pocket passer. That's just, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but that it is proven data that we know that they don't check it down because these quarterbacks are superheroes. Why would you not use your superpower? Why am I going to check it down when I can be Josh Allen and go run some people over and get a whole bunch of yards and get my own touchdowns? So that's a huge problem because you would need Cook to be at minimum a 40-plus reception type player to hit that kind of a maybe he's going to have a breakout campaign. So that's already a downside for him. We have reports coming out of Buffalo that we talked about it on today's Footballers episode. It looks right now that Damian Harris and Latavius Murray are the two who are getting the goal line carries. So not only do you have to worry about James, do you have to worry about Josh Allen? Somehow you have to worry about Latavius Murray. Like to me, I'm pretty interested in. I'm more interested in Damian Harris at his ADP because, like, I mean, they went after him immediately. This is one of those scenarios that we see a lot of a division rival who has a player that just torches them over and over, and they're like, "We got to get this guy on our team," and that's what they did. They went and they got a hammer in Damian Harris, who I think Harris is very good. I'm not taking away from James Cook, but I think Harris is a tremendous running back. So at best, I would see those two platooning when they're working on first and second down work. Maybe Cook is the third down guy and the 2-minute guy, but you're not getting the amount of high value touches that you really need for James Cook to turn into a breakout. So for me right now, he's kind of there. I'm not calling him a bust by any means because I think he's a good player. So I'm leaving the margin that maybe my action is incorrect, which in fantasy football, we all better leave that margin because we get stuff wrong all the time. But I don't have like the full confidence to just be like, no, it's Damian Harris. He's the guy. It's just like, no, I think Damian Harris can have a bigger impact because of just he's going to get a touchdown to me on the goal line, and it's not Josh Allen. It's probably Damian Harris.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a pretty messy situation, and he's being propped up by a combination of his last name and the youth. Like you see him here on NFC ADP. He's RB29, 80th overall. And then the Damian Harris, who you mentioned, is RB41, 117 overall. So if that's the way this situation plays out, you're right. I'd much rather have Damian Harris. What's that? Almost 40 picks later. Not even close. If it plays out the way you were just discussing, there's no way he matches that ADP, even though it's, a mid-range RB3, probably a flex. It's just Harris is the much safer, especially with the goal line. He has a nose for the goal line there in New England. He always seems to find a way to, just get in the end zone. And I know that's always seemed to be a Bill Belichick thing. They have running backs with high touchdown totals, and we'll see if it carries over here. But like you said, even if Damian Harris doesn't mess it up for him, Josh Allen likely will. So James Cook, I think for me, is going closer to the bust, but you're right. He's not necessarily a bust. He's just someone who's there. And even if you look in this range here, we've got Pierce, White, Swift, Connor. I like Connor and White in this range. Montgomery, I don't mind Montgomery. I think he's going to have a bigger role than people are giving him credit for. So Cook, I'm not really taking Cook here. This is the last month in ADP. I suspect if I adjusted to this week, Kamara is significantly higher. So we're just going to disregard him. 3-game suspension. There's no way he's going 89th overall. So it just in this range, he's not really someone I'm targeting. Is there anyone here that you really prefer over him in this range? Can you see it well?
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, it might be a little bit high compared to James Cook, but I'm a pretty big Alexander Madison fan, which is like the Madison discussion online is actually it's fun, like because it's not a unanimous support or hate for Alexander Madison. This is going back a ways now, but when I scouted Madison, he was one of my favorite running backs during that particular draft class of like, this guy's a 3-down back. Like he has a really strong pass catching profile and he looked like a good shifty back. But you have the problem over the last 2 years as the backup seeing snaps just every once in a while when he would go give Dalvin Cook that breather, it kind of I don't like Madison doesn't strike me as the running back. He needs rhythm, right? Like we need to get this guy a bunch of touches before something good happens. So that's how I see what happened those last 2 years, especially last year when Kevin O'Connell came in and used Dalvin Cook more than he'd ever been used. Like he really went with a one running back system, which that's like another note. Maybe Kevin O'Connell's a one running back guy and it's Alexander Madison. Like put him on that offense with a defense that's going to be pretty rough, and like the way the Bucks will win is through offense yet again. He's so interesting to me that we're finally, and it's going to be like so many different factors going in here. Of like,
Yeah.
it's been Madison's been in the league so long. Well, why wouldn't he have already broken out? Well, he's behind Dalvin Cook, man. You got to give him a little bit of grace here. Dalvin Cook has been incredible. And then depending on which metrics you like the yards per carry, people are like, well, Dalvin Cook's way better than Madison. But then the broken tackle people are like, well, actually, Alexander Madison was breaking more tackles than Dalvin Cook. And so it's like, that's why I think is so fascinating about Madison is even if you're the analytics people and your advanced metrics, like you can go pick pieces and tell a completely different story for Alexander Madison. So this is going to be a full-on user's choice of a guy who's never really done it, and he's in the running back dead zone. But if he hits, he's a top 12 running back.
That's amazing that you mentioned him. I've done probably 25 of these sleepers, breakouts, and busts, and they have turned into Alexander Madison and Calvin Ridley anonymous. There's no middle ground. You have half of them, Ridley or Madison is their sleeper or breakout. The other half, he's their bust. You love him or you hate him. There's no middle ground. So that's absolutely right. So you are a Madison guy as opposed to a Cook. There are many who aren't, so it all depends on your draft. That's another one where 66 as his ADP for Madison, I find he either goes 46 or 86, depending on if you're in the league that loves him or hates him. So, all righty, I will get us moving here to the next player, Dallas QB Dak Prescott, projected to be QB 11, 4,111 passing yards, 29.1 TDs to 13.9 interceptions, will be projected to add in 248.5 rushing yards and an additional 2.3 touchdowns. What are your thoughts on Dak? Does he qualify here as sleeper, breakout, bust, or is he just another guy who's just there?
I really like Dak Prescott. Like I find myself gravitating towards the Cowboys offense in general, which is also fun because this whole offseason has been really driven by the Mike McCarthy, we're going to run the funny quote of basically like, we're scoring too many points. We got to get the defense rest. We're going to run more. Let's run more out of here. Let's get just old, busted, washed offensive coordinator in here. And so it's just like, it hasn't felt great over the offseason.
No.
And yet, okay, but yeah, it hasn't felt great. But let's step back. Let's look at who the Cowboys are as a team right now. It could change because we're in the range where they could add a player. But right now, you have CeeDee Lamb, who's inarguably a top wide receiver in the NFL. You can go top 5, but universally, people agree CeeDee Lamb is elite. Yeah, they traded for Brandon Cooks, who Brandon Cooks is still fast. He still has it. He's kind of this forgotten guy because it seems like no teams want to hold on to him for more than just a couple of years. And it was a down season for him last year, but look what Brandon Cooks was dealing with. He was dealing with the worst or the second worst team in the NFL and the Houston Texans, who are now in a full rebuild. But the Cowboys this wasn't like they traded for him. Like they went out and they got him. You have Michael Gallup, another year off the ACL, which Michael Gallup definitely has his truthers out there. Let's say he gets back to the pre-ACL form, the form that the Cowboys gave a crap ton of money for, and they chose him over Amari Cooper. Like that's 3 really top-tier wide receivers for you to have at your disposal. And then at the running back position, can you really run? Like Tony Pollard's a smaller dude. No. Like you can't give Tony Pollard 20+. If you give Tony Pollard 20+ carries a week, he will break down. And then it's like, okay, well, who's going to fill in for him? Malik Davis? He's smaller than Tony Pollard.
Deuce
Ronald Jones? Deuce Vaughn, the smallest man in the NFL?
Yeah.
Like their personnel right now, at least, does not look like a team that's going to be able to just establish that run, high T just beating people in the face. Like, I don't know how they actually do that. So that's why I keep going back. And Dak has done it for years. Like it was a down year for Dak last year. But what was the story of last year? The dude broke his thumb in week 1, right? In his throwing hand. He does come back, but I mean, he's still coming back from a broken thumb. I don't know if anyone else, like, I've broken my thumb.
It's not fun.
It took forever for my thumb to heal. And my thumb is still messed up from when I broke it 8 years ago or something like that. So I will give Dak a little bit of a pass. I know his interceptions were out of control the past few years, but the guy has been prolific for fantasy football. He doesn't have Kellen Moore anymore, so won't have like the smart passing offense, so to speak. But I think that I really like CeeDee Lamb. I love Brandon Cooks where he's going in drafts right now, because Brandon Cooks could be an 1,100-yard wide receiver in my opinion. And if you've got two alpha wide receivers, I want their quarterback, especially if other people in fantasy don't.
Yeah, but that's why he's being so undervalued, because his best weapon is probably the most undervalued receiver of the last 10 years. Nobody ever wants Brandon Cooks. You get him in the 8th round every year and he produces. You look at the ADP here, and that's why I have a lot of shares of him. So the top 3, obviously, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, they go early. And then I find the tier here of Burrow, Jackson, Herbert, Fields, even Lawrence I find is creeping up into that tier. Those ones also go right off the board really early, especially if you're in a super flex. But this group here seems to bunch together of Watson, Tua, and Dak. And I am not a big Voldemort fan, but if I can get Tua and Dak, I've had a couple of leagues where I've been able to double stack these guys as my super flex. I love Tua and I love Dak. I think they're probably in a similar range as some of these guys in the tier above them, but they come at such a cheaper cost. What do you think about, this range in the QB ADP here at 10th and 11th overall for Dak?
We're in agreement here, because like looking at Trevor Lawrence, which I'm not denying that Trevor Lawrence is a great quarterback. He seems like he's on his way, but as of right now, you're like, well, we haven't seen that. It's a full projection of that Trevor Lawrence is going to take a tier jump into the elite. And I know that Lawrence can move a little bit, but it's like for quarterbacks that you're drafting in this range, they have to have a superpower, and generally you want that to be running. So like right after Justin Fields, and Lamar Jackson and everybody, Trevor Lawrence and Dak are more similar to me than I think people want to, actually publicly admit. So I'm putting myself out there, and it's like, man, if Trevor Lawrence threw for 4,900 yards and 30 touchdowns, like Dak has already done that. Where 2 years ago, Dak Prescott threw for almost 4,500 yards and 37 touchdowns. It was a down season this past year. Again, he broke his thumb, and he had CeeDee Lamb. Like Michael Gallup was not ready to go. Jalen Tolbert was not ready to go for the Dallas Cowboys. That's why they went and traded for Brandon Cooks. So it's like, if I'm going to take a primarily passing or a pocket passer, I want to get a little bit of a discount, and I'll put the Dallas Cowboys weapons right up there with the Jaguars ones. Like I think they're not necessarily that far when it comes to talent, how I would evaluate their wide receivers.
I find the argument for Trevor Lawrence is the Family Guy argument. Do you want Dak Prescott or do you want the mystery box? The mystery box could be Dak Prescott. Yeah, it could be a boat. Exactly. Trevor Lawrence could be anything. He could even be Dak Prescott. So why don't I just take Dak Prescott at, what is that? Trevor Lawrence, 51 overall, Dak at 95. 44 picks later. Why don't I just take Dak and, stack up on running back or wide receiver earlier? I don't get it. And even I said, sorry, go ahead.
I say that ADP gap is like, even if Dak, I have Dak projected as a better fantasy quarterback than Lawrence this year, which is, I don't think that's a very common thing out there.
No.
But it's like, even if Lawrence produces Dak, is he going to 50 spots worth or whatever that Dak is? I mean, that has to be multiple points per game better than Dak Prescott.
But even like in the super flex leagues, you see it where the top 8 quarterbacks fly off the board 8 in a row. Like Scott Fishbowl, fly off the board 8 in a row. And then you'll see the team where I've got it not in Scott Fishbowl, but in one league where it was super flex and I was the 112. I just loaded up on I forget who it was. I got Chase and maybe CMC at the end because everyone went quarterback. Yep. And then when it got back to me with the third round reversal at the 301, I got Dak anyways. So I've stacked myself with 2 studs early, and I've got Dak anyways instead of reaching and taking Trevor Lawrence. So I don't get it myself. Even if he outproduces him, like you said, it's going to be a negligible difference likely, if not Dak outproducing him. So I just give me Dak. Let's move here to our final player. We have Denver tight end Greg Dulcich, projected as tight end 12, no rushing stats projected, 49.4 receptions, 598 receiving yards for 3.8 receiving touchdowns. What do you think about Greg Dulcich, besides the fact that he looks like Weird Al?
I mean, he does the curly hair. He's got luscious, flowing locks. I like Greg. I like what Greg D's putting out there. He's in the sleeper category for me, and I would say I'm okay with Greg Dulcich. I know Jason, my buddy from the Footballers, and I think Andy probably too, but Jason is in on Greg Dulcich. If he punts the tight end position, Greg D is usually who he ends up drafting. And I mean, we saw flashes of it last year, so it's not based on nothing, and it's also a bet based on Sean Payton. Is Sean Payton as good of an offensive coach as the Denver Broncos believe? Traded all those picks, given him all of that money, and I don't know. Like I think so. I think Sean Payton is that guy, but there's also he had Drew Brees. He had a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback, Drew Brees, his entire career, and then at the very end, he didn't have Drew Brees, and guess whose offense was not very good? And it was Sean Payton. Which
I'm a Saints fan, I can tell you.
But look at Bill Belichick. He Tom Brady anymore, and all of a sudden his offense has fallen apart. So I mean, you're locked in hand. Your franchise quarterback and your head coach both kind of have to go the same direction. So it's a bet on Sean Payton, a bet that Payton can get Russell Wilson back into form. I don't know what to think about the Denver Broncos because it seems the fantasy football community, we've moved on from Cortland Sutton, who I was all in on last year. He gave me the fantasy burns in the 3rd degree. And we're like, okay, Jerry Jeudy. And now we have a report coming from the Athletic saying Cortland Sutton's been the main wide receiver for Russell Wilson. And I'm like, no. So the Broncos and the miraculous healing of Javonte Williams, the Broncos, I don't know what's going on over there.
Weird.
It's all just really, really weird stuff. But the metrics for Greg Dulcich are at least interesting. Of not every tight end can catch a 40-yard touchdown. There's guys that can't do it. Dulcich is one of those guys. So I think that where he's going in drafts, it could certainly be worse.
I was on the wrong end of some long tight end runs in Scott Fishbowl and ended up punting and ended up with him as my tight end 1. It was terrifying. I'm a Saints fan, and the first thing I thought was Sean Payton loved Adam Troutman. Who did he bring with him? Adam Troutman. I'm going, this is a nightmare.
You are speaking my language now because I was I mean, many associate me as the captain of the Troutman hype train, which, I mean, guilty. I really thought he was going to turn into something. So I keep trying to throw jabs in there. I'm like, guys, they brought him to the Denver Broncos.
Yes,
so
it scares me.
Nothing. I'm in on Dulcich, but there's nothing more in this fantasy football season that would give me more personal satisfaction if somehow Adam Troutman ended up being the guy, because it would just be the biggest victory lap vindication. But it's not going to happen. But I can dream.
It scares me. Like I said, I don't know what to think of this team. That scares me. And then I thought there were too many mouths to feed. And then the fireball went down. It looks like he's done for the season there. So that's one less mouth to feed. So I thought, yeah, I like Dulcich. This could be all right. But if you told me he finished as a top 6 tight end, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me he finished outside the top 20, I also wouldn't be surprised. So this is terrifying. But he's in a range in the ADP. Tight end 13, 135 overall. It seems to really fall off after Njoku even. I find,
Yes.
Kelsey and Andrews go crazy early. Then lately it's been Hawkinson, Pitts, Kittle's been up there. They go early as well. Waller and Goddard. And then you normally have a little bit of a gap here. Engram, Firemouth, and Njoku go. And then after that, it's basically from Schultz on, who I like Schultz, so I have some of him. But I like Schultz, Dulcich, Higbee, and Everett.
I was going to say that's our first real big disagreement. Like Dalton Schultz is off my draft board. I would like give me Okonkwo, give me Dulcich, Higbee, Cole Kmet. Like I'll take all these guys over. I think Dalton Schultz was. I think it's Austin Hooper all over again. A guy who was a product of the system. He was in Dak Prescott, which is why like Jake Ferguson needs to be rising up people's sleeper draft boards because Luke Schoonmaker, the Schoon Man, he's back on the field, but he's missed a lot of time. It feels like Ferguson's going to be able to take that job. That's where I think that Schultz was a product of that. And then look at the contract. Like it seemed like no teams, not even the Cowboys, were interested to give that guy money. And then you're like, well, tight ends aren't going to get money. Let's go 1 month later, and then Cole Kmet gets the bag from the Chicago Bears. So it's not the tight end market. It's that, and you have a rookie quarterback for the Houston Texans, just a bad offense. So I'm very out on Dalton Schultz.
No, I'm not in on his talent at all. I think he was just the product of massive volume. But with a rookie quarterback who might have to dump off to a big body tight end and the total lack of any receiving depth on that team, really, I just think he might lead the Texans in targets. I don't like him at all. I just, in that range, like I said, you're throwing darts. He's not normally my preference. I go Dulcich, Higbee, or Everett, but I don't, it's all dart throws. I feel strongly about any of them. I have a few shares of Kmet.
Gotcha.
I'm out on Kincaid. Kincaid goes too high, I think, but I don't know. It
might be a boat.
Yeah, it's all over the place. I don't know any of these here. If you told me any of them were top 5 or any of them were outside the top 24, it could. But that's why tight end. It's not exactly known for its depth. Despite every year we say this is the year tight end's never been deeper. It's not true. It's never been shallower. Fair. Yeah, this is why we see Travis Kelce going at the 101 in some drafts. So. All right, Mike. Well, thank you for joining me. I'm sure you've got a busy day planned, so I won't keep you any longer.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that, man. Thank you for having me on. Thanks for reaching out.
Is that Mike Evans in your background? I can only see the corner of it.
Yes. This way.
There you go. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, this has been Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts with the fantasy hitman, Mike Wright. This is Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and thank you for tuning in to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thanks again, Mike, for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care and have a great day.